Welcome back everyone to Gotcha Interact. We'll be taking a look at the second half of the 5.7 banners today. The first character we're going to be talking about is going to be Mavuika with her first rerun, and then we're going to be also talking about another character sharing a banner with her, which is going to be Emilie. So let's go through both of these banners and see whether or not these characters, or even maybe their weapons, are a good pulling option for you. Now, onto the video. So the first character we have, as we stated before, is going to be Mavuika. Now, with her being the Pyro Archon, finally getting her first rerun towards the end of Natlan, let's go ahead and talk about how she's going to work as a character. Now, if you've already kind of seen a lot of working on how she works, it's pretty simple, in what you want to do, but, understanding her kit is going to be pretty helpful, especially when talking about her burst. But first, looking at her ascension, she ascends into crit damage, helping out a little bit more, especially with her 4-piece artifact set, helping you a little bit more with that crit ratio. Now, looking into her skills, her normal attack, not really something that has to be leveled, it is a good idea to, but really what you want to focus on is the skill and the burst, and they have a lot to talk about. So let's go ahead and look right into the skill called the Named Moment. It states that basically you are going to summon the All Fire Armaments, and at this point in time also deal Night Soul aligned pyro damage. After using this, Mavuika's Night Soul points are restored to her maximum value, which if you take a look at the very bottom of her skill attributes, you're going to see her Night Soul point limit goes to 80. At this point in time, she will then enter the Night Soul Blessing state. While you are using the All Fire Armaments, you can either tap or hold with the skill here. If you tap, it is actually going to have a pretty big difference on what you're going to be doing. Your tap version is what a lot of people are going to use for off-field pyro. So using the tap version, all fire armaments will manifest as a ring of searing radiance above the character, and will follow the active character and attack nearby opponents at certain intervals, dealing Night Soul aligned pyro damage from off-field. Now, using the hold version of this skill is actually going to manifest the Flame Strider, or Mavuika's motorcycle. In this state, Mavuika can ride the Flame Strider at high speeds, or activate its hidden backup propulsion mode, basically using your sprint button to jump over into different things and go a lot faster, but also glide even in midair. Mavuika's normal charging plunging attacks while she's in this state will also be converted to deal Night Soul aligned pyro damage, which cannot be overridden. When sprinting, she also deals Night Soul aligned pyro damage to opponents along her path. So as you get rid of your Night Soul points though, this is going to get you out of this state and outside of the Night Soul Blessing state as well. Now with this, it has its own modifiers in the Flame Strider hits, so all the damage that you're going to be doing with your Flame Strider or with Mavuika's bike is all actually based in the actual skill, not your normal attack talent, as you can see through the modifiers given at the bottom. Now looking at her burst, a little bit of a different thing, she does not actually use elemental energy to get her elemental burst back, but instead she uses Fighting Spirit. To actually get Fighting Spirit, there's a few different ways you can do this. One of the few methods is going to be when in combat, Night Soul points are then going to be consumed by nearby party members, and then will be then converted to Fighting Spirit. Another way is when nearby party members' normal attacks will hit opponents, this will give Mavuika 1.5 Fighting Spirit. When you are using Night Soul and that kind of exchange, if you use up a character's Night Soul and they are 80 points, then those 80 Night Soul points are going to change to 80 Fighting Spirit. Using more Night Soul points gets you more Fighting Spirit, which is going to then allow you to use Mavuika's burst. Now, Mavuika's burst has almost 2 levels to her actual burst. The first part of her burst can be consumed at about 50% or halfway. After using this, Mavuika gains 10 Night Soul points and enters the Night Soul Blessing state, riding her Flame Strider high into the air, and then she will use a powerful Sunfell Slice against opponents on the ground, dealing Night Soul aligned AoE pyro damage, entering the Crucible of Death and Life state. During this time, Mavuika's various actions will no longer consume Night Soul points for a period of time, and her interruption resistance is increased. Also, the damage dealt by that big damage hit, as well as the normal and charge attacks that you're going to be doing in this state, are going to be increased based on the amount of Fighting Spirit she has when using the Elemental Burst. Now, that means that even though you are at 50%, trying to fill that gauge almost 2 times is going to be better for you, and the reason why is because you're increasing the amount of damage multipliers that you can actually do with her damage. Whole point is, consume a lot more of Night Soul points, therefore getting more Fighting Spirit, and the more Fighting Spirit you have, the bigger your damage numbers are going to be. Are you looking for discounts on your favorite games? If so, Lootbar has got you covered. Lootbar is the go-to top-up service for all types of gamers for all types of games. And with that, Lootbar also offers tons of different benefits like delivery within 30 minutes of your purchase, if not even quicker and within seconds. They also have secure transactions because, well, for all games, including things like Genshin for instance, you only really need a UID and the server that it is with as well and associated with. That means that there's no need for any passwords or emails, so those things stay out of other people's hands and stay with you. Covering gachas like Genshin Impact and Love in Deep Space to other games like PUBG, Lootbar covers your transactions the more that you are going to game. And what's the best part? New users get 10% off of their first transaction as well. To start saving today with Lootbar, go ahead and click the link in the description or in the pinned comment as well. Now, let's get back to the content.
Now let's take a look at Emilie on the other side of the banner. When you level up Emilie and ascend her, you will be ascending into crit damage, which is good for her as a sub-DPS kind of character. Looking into her skills, skipping over her basic attack just because it doesn't really do anything for her, you really just want to focus mostly on her skill and burst together. Looking at that skill, she's going to create a Lumidos case that deals AoE Dendro damage. Now looking further into this Lumidos case, it will fire off puffs of Pure Dew at nearby opponents at intervals, dealing Dendro damage. Now when nearby opponents are affected by burning, they will give off scents at intervals, and one scent can be created this way every 2 seconds. The Lumidos case collects these nearby scents, and the Lumidos case will level up after gathering 2 of these scents, after which it will fire 1 extra puff of Pure Dew when firing, while the damage dealt by and damage AoE of the above attack will also be increased. One Luminos case created by Emilie herself can exist at any one time. The case starts at level 1 and can go up to level 2. And if the case does not collect any scents for 8 seconds while it is on the field, it will go back to level 1. At the end of the day, you want to create burning reactions periodically while Emilie is in the team, just so these Luminos cases from off-field are leveling up and actually dealing more damage overall. Also, quick note on Emilie here, she does have a Numa Archie that she will be doing Numa-aligned Dendro damage through with her skill, so that is something to note there. And then looking into her burst, she will guide the fragrances collected within the case, and Emilie is going to convert them into pure Dendro energy, creating a level 3 Lumidos case and stowing existing cases away. Now before I keep going there, the reason this is a level 3 and this is good for her is because in the skill, without using the burst, you can only have a level 1 Lumidos case or a level 2. The way to get level 3 Lumidos cases is strictly tied to the burst, which is why you still want to level the burst and make sure you are using the burst. While a level 3 Lumidos case exists, it will not gather nearby scents, but it will continuously cause Scented Dew to descend, attacking opponents within range and dealing Dendro damage. During this time, 1 drop of Scented Dew will descend every 0.3 seconds, and 1 opponent can become the target every 0.7 seconds. When the duration ends, a level 1 Lumidos case will be recreated. If a Lumidos case was stowed away when using her burst, then the case that was stowed away will be deployed instead, and its duration will be reset. So what that means there is, let's say you have a level 2 Lumidos case from Emilie's skill out on the field. If you then go to use Emilie's burst, it will stow the level 2 Lumidos case, and when the burst ends and it pops out the Lumidos case after the burst duration is over, it will pop out a level 2 Lumidos case because that's what it's stowed, not a level 1. So that's basically what that means there. Also, while her burst is active, the elemental skill will not create a Lumidos case. So there's no real reason to use her skill after using the burst. You'd really just want to use it before to funnel the particles into Emilie. I guess the only reason you'd want to use her skill after that is to funnel particles to another character.
Now jumping over into our question section, really looking at the major question of obviously should you pull, with some other side questions, which the first being, what are you looking at value for each of these characters? You know, which character in here is actually worth the pull? Now, looking at Mavuika, I think we can both say, Riff, that it's pretty apparent she's just absolutely insane. She's his top number 1 DPS, and it's going to be very difficult to not want to pull her. Just because of the value that she brings to any person's account. It's kind of like grabbing Farina. You know, no matter what, it's a straight damage increase. Farina's great. Here, Mavuika, not only can she be a DPS, but she can also be a support at the same time by doing more of a sub DPS, maybe not support, but a sub DPS to help out the main DPS. So there's kind of give and take there. But I think Mavuika's always a solid pull, at least right now. At the same time, looking at the other side of the banner, which is Emilie, I think that right now her value is very high, and I think it's because of the endgame. I think Stygian Onslaught and even maybe some of the other endgame with Kanish kind of running recently, maybe kind of shows her value to be a little bit stronger. I just think that this is almost the closing off of her final chapter. I don't say that she's going to be absolutely useless after this, don't get me wrong, but I think that, for instance, the Stygian Onslaught with the second boss that we had, as well as the possible next boss we're going to be getting with the Papilla, she's always been very good with those burning teams, the Kanish burning teams. So if you have Kanish and you really need an Emilie, this is great. So I think she has some good value. I just think that it's coming. This is maybe her last banner where a lot of her value is kind of maybe coming to a close. But that's enough from what I've said. Rift, what do you think?
I think that was a good way of actually putting it with Emilie. Like you said, Stygian Onslaught has given her a lot of value. I think before Stygian Onslaught was in the game, she still had some value, of course, being in Kanish's best team, right? But it wasn't as necessary, or you didn't have to absolutely have it. Like, Kanish main didn't have to have Emilie to do the Abyss and some of the other content. Kanish was already strong enough with characters like Mavuika also in that team, and just etc. So Emilie wasn't a dire necessity, but when it came to Stygian Onslaught, I think for people that didn't have Kanish, Emilie was kind of a saving grace for doing like Mavuika burning or Arlecchino burning or whatever, to kind of barely cut it for doing that second boss, like you mentioned, that the lava dragon statue. Just really wanting pyro DPS kind of a thing, without the hydro, without the melt stuff, the cryo. So Emilie just kind of felt really good, even if you didn't have Kanish, for just because burning, and Emilie really likes burning, so it was kind of just having a sub DPS instead of an on-field DPS in Kanish. But even so now, like with the next kind of mode of Stygian Onslaught coming out in about 20 days as of this recording or whatever, that Papilla, we also already know that Kanish, Emilie, they're just really good for that, like you stated. So, I mean, yeah, everything you said about Emilie, kind of like you said, this being her final chapter or whatever, makes a lot of sense. We've seen it in the Stygian Onslaught, as you've already talked about. I already kind of went into it as well. I think they get it at this point. They obviously wanted to rerun Emilie because they just reran Kanish. So why would Emilie wait any longer? It makes sense to have Emilie right after Kanish. And I know a lot of us were wondering, well, what about Mualani? What about Chaska? Some of these characters that also need reruns. Thankfully, it looks like, based on speculations, they're coming up a little later. But it was either characters like that or Kanish, because Kanish was also in 5.0. And so it makes sense that Emilie should also be here, because she was even sooner than that, which was 5.8, or rather 4.8, I should say. So yeah,
Right, yeah.
I think that's, like you said, just all in a nutshell. If you have Kanish, Emilie has a really good value, and even if you don't, if you really, really care about Stygian Onslaught for this phase and even the next phase, and you don't have Kanish, honestly, if you really want to clear that stuff, Emilie might be a consideration, because without either one of them, it's going to be really difficult to get that Lava Flame Dragon or the Papilla, especially if you don't have Chaska. Chaska's kind of a secondary substitute when you don't have good burn teams for the Papilla. And there's a few other things you can do, but honestly, I would say if you care about completing that content and you don't have Kanish, I would actually consider Emilie, but that's kind of up to
That's
you. Also,
also
that doesn't
like,
require the weapon. Yeah, what
yeah,
were we gonna
I
say?
think like it's also like, and I think because we're always thinking in the mind of like fearless and dire, that's where the brain set,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
mindset that we're in. And at least the last video, talking, yeah, at least understanding some people, because we're trying to think up here so that everyone else under us can kind of understand where they can kind of grab. But I think in general, if you're talking about, should you guys be playing, not talking from any perspective at this point, it's a lot easier early on, especially the primo levels. If you're trying to get primo gems, it's a lot easier to you're more at world level type, bosses. So you're not at the point where it's becoming such a pain to do
Mm-hmm.
what you need to do. It's just when you
Yeah.
get to Fearless and Dire is kind of, I just wanted to kind of state that because that's kind of where we're pushing, at least the Stygian
That is the
Onslaught
headspace right now.
idea, because that's where she becomes more useful. If we bring it, Stygian Onslaught back down to level 90 with, kind of hard difficulty or whatever, she becomes trivialized again, because you can just kind
Yeah.
of, just like the Abyss and Imaginary Theater, you can use other things to kind of work around her. Whereas here, that's why I guess we're kind of bringing it up. When you look at Fearless and Dire, or maybe even Merciless before that, you can kind of figure out a solid idea of where everything fits in, because she has a little bit more value. Therefore, like we're saying, if you're trying to finish the top of the end game, that's where you're gonna start to see right now where she becomes a little bit more helpful. But anyways, I just wanted to kind of bring
Yeah,
that
no,
up too.
absolutely. I think that's a good point to bring up. Like we're thinking, I guess that's kind of why I said, like, if you care about clearing
Right? Yeah.
those higher end like, you might want to consider it. She is, I would say, at the end of the day, Emilie is more of a veteran pull. Like, You already have some other stuff. You have substitute kind of teams. I will say this to also just kind of, I guess, play devil's advocate with myself. I don't have Emilie or Kanish, and I still was able to get the Fearless difficulty Lava Dragon
Yep,
with a
same.
Varessa overload team. So there are workarounds, but it's highly invested kind of teams that, I didn't have the Hydro or the Cryo in there to kind of mess up his resistance state. That's the biggest thing with that boss specifically. And Papilla has his own thing with the Night Soul Shield, so usually Burn just works really well because it's ticking it really fast. Chaska just deals all kinds of damage while being an Atlan character, so it is Night Soul aligned. So there's that. At the end of the day, Emilie's not a really super high value pull, but she does have some value if you have Kanish, even if you don't, if you want to try out a burning team. And then Mavuika, I think Mavuika should be a consideration no matter where you're at in your account, not only because is she the best DPS in the game, like that's a given, but when you look at a lot of other DPSs in Genshin and look at a lot of their most optimal teams, their best teams, Mavuika shows up in a lot of them. So if you do care about having maybe you don't care about having a Mavuika team where Mavuika is the main DPS, but if you, let's say you're a Cloran main and you want Cloran's best overload team, Mavuika's in that. She's a part of that. Varessa's best overload team, Mavuika's a part of that. Kanish's best burning team, Mavuika's a part of that. And Mualani's best team, Mavuika's the off-field pyro. Mavuika is in so many different teams that no matter where you're really at, if you don't have Mavuika, it's a very healthy consideration. You really can't go wrong getting Mavuika. And when we talk about 4 stars later, there's a good 4-star on here at Yansan. We'll get to that section later. Yeah, like Vixen said, I think the biggest takeaway here with value is going to be the weapon banner, which we will get to as well in that section. So I think that's enough said about Mavuika and Emilie's value. Was there anything else that maybe came to mind, Vixen?
Not really. I think the next thing is really just teams, but I think we kind of just already went over teams a little bit.
That is true. I kind of bled right into teams. So
in a very basic
yeah.
sense, I mean, the very basic is Mavuika's got her melt team, her premium melt team. I'm sure you
Yeah.
could try to force Vape in there somehow with some sort of, I mean, even as an off-fielder, technically she works in 1,000 different other teams. But, that opens up the door for her to be also an overload, on-field or off-field, to help either an Electro on-fielder or Pyro on-fielder. That allows her to be in a burning team as an off-fielder. That allows her to be kind of anywhere. Anywhere that you could see Pyro as an on-fielder or an off-fielder, that's just kind of where she fits in. Not really necessarily a support option, but can be because she still does give the on-fielder a damage buff as well. So there's that. And then obviously you have Emilie, which it's practically just burning, because if not, once again, as you went through the kit, the burning is pretty helpful and necessary. But I think but the teams are pretty basic. So I think in general, that's probably as much as we could really get into. If anything, I really actually want to know, considering you are Mr. 4-star King, and I'm going to keep calling you that till the end of time, what does really what do you think of the 4-stars? Because we have Yao Yao, Xiangling, and Yansan. So how does that maybe change pulling plans for people?
Yeah, so I know there's a lot of people, at least on the Twitter, when they revealed what the 4-stars would actually be, there's a lot of people I've seen that are like, oh man, they put Yansan here, and they're not happy about it. And I can understand it, because in that perspective of a player like that is they wanted to save. They already have Mavuika. They don't want Emilie. They don't care to have Emilie. They don't want to get the cons on Mavuika, whatever. They were planning to skip either for Anefa or just for Nodcry in general. And we're also in the back of their head thinking, I want to also pick up Yansan because I never got her, or because I want to get to that C2, maybe get the C6 if you're close. And so people are kind of conflicted. I did not want to pull on this banner, but Yansan's there. That was one of the things that was on my list for right now was Yansan cons. So I can see the conflict there, but at the same time, it's good value because Mavuika's best overload team is going to want Yansan, and if not her, or run something like that. Yansan is in a lot of some of the top teams in the game right now. Any overload team probably has Yansan in it, even if it's not Varessa, just because Yansan's crazy. I mean, it's the Bennett substitute without playing Circle Impact. So Yansan is just a really, really valuable character. She's kind of tied to the hip with Chevers in those overload teams, whether it's Mavuika, Cloran, Varessa, really anybody else that's viable to be in an overload team. Janson's great. And even outside of those teams, there are some Dendro teams, like some aggravate spread teams that Janson can turn up in and can be pretty fun. Obviously, that's not like why you would pull Janson. That's not going to be her best placements, but she's a good candidate for stuff like that. If you enjoy your Tainari, if you enjoy still playing Alhaitham, or just, heck, even Sino. Varessa even has a Dendro variant team with Xianyun that's still really good and still really fun. So she has a lot of different things she can be in, and even outside of meta talk, because she just is giving an attack buff, even if you're just throwing her in some non-meta stuff, so maybe some 4-star DPS teams. Hazo uses attack technically. There's a lot of attack scaling 4-star characters that can just use Janson. It's going to be good for the exploration because she has that fast running speed. There's a lot of pros to just Janson as a character. She's great in the meta, she's great outside the meta, she's great for exploration, etc., etc., etc. So there's a lot of good things about her, and I think honestly it's okay to have her with Mavuika because those are both really valuable characters. Like I already said, with Mavuika's value, no matter where you're at, you kind of want or should consider, if you care about clearing content, you should be considering Mavuika, and Janson really being there kind of just nudges that even further. If you don't have Janson, I'm going to go and step out on a limb and say this. If you don't have Janson and you are playing for meta, you're playing for clearing the content as fast as you can, maybe you're only half a year into Genshin, but you're still wanting to get up to the Abyss. If you're still not at floor 12 yet, you want to at least try your hand at Stygian Onslaught. Even if you don't want Mavuika or you don't want Emilie, I would consider throwing at a handful of 10 pulls just to see if you can get Janson, because Janson is almost 5-star level. Getting your C0 Janson copy would be almost as good as getting a new 5-star. I mean, she's just that good. Would you agree with me on that, or do you think that's kind of a hot take?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with a lot of other things, because not only is she, like you were talking about, she's good currently, looking in the future, we've talked about Lunar Charge being a thing, we've talked about these new types of reactions. Keep in mind that Anefa, another future character, is also going to work in attack, and, you know, obviously a character like this is going to be increasing attack and is also an electro character, so you could still have that type of idea with those types of units and still be helpful for future things. So I just wanted to also throw that out there, but I have to agree. I think that, like, if you, to an extent, I would have to agree. I think that, like, maybe a 5-star maybe holds a little bit more value, maybe because especially 5-stars hold maybe a specific niche, whereas especially a 4-star support is holding a little bit more of a over widespread kind of helpfulness, and maybe that's why it's a little bit of a difference there. But I would still have to agree. I think that it's still very good getting an Janson, and going after her, even dropping a few pulls, isn't really a problem. Or if you drop an early Mavuika, that's not bad either, obviously, considering she's very strong. So
Right.
I know, obviously, yes, some people are going to be mad, but it's because most likely they have a C6, you know, Janson, because they already burned through to try to get the C6 Janson, and or a C3 up to the C2 or whatever, and then now they're also, you know, they already have Mavuika as well. So a lot of people are like, oh, this is a garbage banner because they already have it, but they're not thinking about the people that don't. So it's still a good banner. It's just maybe not for the masses considering what's on it. The other thing is we have Xiangling and Yao Yao.
Yeah, Xiangling again. It's
Xiangling
crazy.
is just constantly coming around, which, I mean, once again, not terrible, because if you already have her C6, or if you already have Janson C6, you know, that turns your pulls into basically 9 pulls instead of a 10 pull, because it's a free wish back, so cool. But at the same time, that allows, you know, some other units, you know, Xiangling could still be helpful, maybe gain some extra cons for her if you don't have her C6. But Yao Yao, on the other hand, is very good healer. It's a very solid healer, especially for a lot of Dendro teams, whether it's Bloom, Spread, Aggravate, whatever it may be, Hyper Bloom even. She can still be pretty helpful and useful to be a pretty nice healer at the very least. Maybe not perfect, definitely not a Baiju, but at the same time is a very good substitute for it. Allows, once again, maybe a little bit more variety in the teams that you have. You know, Imaginarium Theater or stuff like that. I think that the 4-stars maybe don't change the pulling plans in the banners, in my personal opinion, once again, because of the masses already probably having at least one copy of Janson and having Mavuika. But I do think that it's not an extreme negative. Once again, you're trying to build some Dendro teams. A Yao Yao's not terrible. Xiangling, kind of rough on that one, but there's always one 4-star that's not perfect in the banner. And then you have, which still, by the way, Xiangling's still really strong and really good, so you can't really ever complain about getting a copy of her, either C0
Yeah, like
or
if you don't
multiple.
have the C4, then
Well, I guess you
technically
wouldn't,
that's
yeah.
a big dub. If you get the C4 and you, for some reason don't have it yet, like that is technically a big dub, because 4 extra seconds on Pyronado is a big deal, because there's
Right.
still instances where Xiangling, even on some of these modern bosses, is still a cheat code, kind of in a sense, like the lava
Mm-hmm.
dragon, because of all that ridiculous pyro
It's just
application that she
consistency,
has.
yeah.
She has no ICD still, which is really good. So she has uses, but if you have the C6, she's also already free, given through the abyss at early stages. So yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of just extra ways that really she kind of comes out there. But Yao Yao, I still think, once again, not on the level of probably the other two on the banner, but still not necessarily a terrible thing to happen. Maybe not a character you want to get like 7 copies of, but also not, a terrible unit to be thrown around here. Well, that's kind of everything to talk about the characters. Really quickly, let's go ahead and look at the weapons. I think we're going to be pretty quick with this, but looking at level 90 at the 1,000 Blazing Suns, which is going to be Mawika's weapon at R1, level 90 is going to give you 741 base attack, so a very high base attack with a very low crit rate of 11%. Looking at the R1 ability, it states that it will gain the Scorching Brilliance effect when using an elemental burst or an elemental skill. The crit damage is then going to be increased with the Scorching Brilliance effect. Your crit damage of the character is going to be increased by 20%, and the attack is going to be increased by 28% for 6 seconds. This effect can be triggered once every 10 seconds, and while a Scorching Brilliance instance is active, its duration is increased by 2 seconds after a normal or charge attack deals elemental damage to an opponent, and then also this effect can be triggered once every second, and the maximum duration increase is 6 seconds. So you can go, if this can be triggered for 6 seconds, you can add an additional 6 seconds. It's going to go up to a maximum of 12 seconds, which gives you gives you 100% uptime, no downtime, because the effect can be triggered every 10 seconds. So technically you're at a -2, which is actually a good thing. Additionally, when the character that equips this weapon is in the Night Soul Blessing state, Scorching Brilliance effects are increased by 75%, and its duration will not count when the equipping character is off the field, which means you actually go to, I think, about a 35% crit damage, and your attack jumps to, I think, like 49%. So that's kind of the extra helping usefulness there. Looking at, obviously, this is going to be Mawika's weapon. Overall, this could be used as a stat stick for some other characters. I mean, crit damage with the crit rate main stat is still helpful as long as they are going to be using like an elemental skill and an elemental burst, pretty somewhat helpful in consistency. They also need to be doing normal and charge attacks as well to make sure that they're getting the uptime up. So there's a few other units that could be helpful and useful in this. I think of a character like Navia that uses this weapon exceptionally well. A character like Ito technically could make it work. Now, attack is still actually helpful on Ito, even though he turns defense into attack. Attack is how he technically does damage. Once again, that's just kind of enough said on that front. Technically, you have other characters like Eula that could use this weapon. Once again, using your elemental skill and burst starts the kind of main effect, and then you need normal and charge attacks afterwards to keep the effect going. So technically, another character like Kanish could make this work. Navia could make it work. Ito, those are kind of my 3 major characters that could make this work. You could throw this as once again on other characters as stat sticks, but those are my main 3 outside of Mawika. Obviously, this could mainly work on.
Yeah, and I know Gaming can use it pretty well. If I'm not mistaken, maybe someone will correct me in the comments. It might be one of his best in slot weapons to use for just a hyper built Gaming, which I think is an honorable mention just because Gaming is crazy in his own right in those melt setups and stuff, doing almost like basically 500,000 per plunge, which is just absolutely insane for a 4-star.
Yeah, the only thing I would have to say is that once again, it is still a good weapon, don't get me wrong, but you're not making full effect of maybe the ability, because remember, it's only 6 seconds that you're getting this, and you need normal and charge attacks to keep the ability proccing for basically forever. And considering he's doing skill into a plunge and a skill into a plunge, as long as you can weave in normal and charges here and there, I think that'll be okay, but you just have to be mindful to do that, which could mess up a rotation. I don't know exactly how that might, but it technically could, and maybe get you off your timing on maximizing his plunge damage hits. But that's just another thing that I was thinking of as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But regardless of that, we also have Luminous Elegy, which is Emilie's weapon. And looking at level 90, you got a base attack of 608, 33.1% crit rate. And remember, she ascends into crit damage, so really good to obviously put on Emilie. Give her a lot of crit rate. Looking at the ability at R1, attack is increased by 15% after the equipping character triggers burning on an opponent or deals dendro damage to burning opponents. The damage dealt is increased by 18%. This effect lasts for 8 seconds with a max of 2 stacks, and when 2 stacks are reached or when the duration is refreshed at 2 stacks, you're going to restore 12 energy. Energy can be restored this way once every 12 seconds. The two aforementioned effects can be triggered even when the character is off field. So obviously very good for Emilie. You're getting crit rate in the main stat, a lot of attack, you're getting just damage bonus, 18% of it, and energy. Like that's a lot of just good stuff to have for a character like Emilie. She's going to like the energy, of course, so you don't have to focus really at all with energy recharge. You may want a little bit, just a tad. Considering she's a 50 energy cost burst, and usually you would play her with another Dendro, usually, not all the time. Like if you have Kanish, you have double Dendro in that team. But if you don't have Kanish, sometimes she might be the only Dendro character in the team, depending on what that team might even look like. I know one team that I really like with her is like a Mualani team that you use Shalon and Mavuika in already, and then Emilie's just nice there for the extra damage, but also the burning makes Mualani very, very consistent, even though she doesn't need it because she's so slow with her attacks. It just makes that team really, really comfortable. So that's like one example, I guess, of where Emilie is the only Dendro in the team. So the energy restoration on this weapon is going to be really good. Then again, she doesn't have a high energy cost, and you might just want a little bit when you're building her. So overall, fantastic weapon for Emilie, obviously. But like some other characters that you could use this on, obviously any characters that are going to be damage dealers in kind of just how they work. So it's a really good stat stick. You're getting the crit rate, the attack, and just straight up damage bonus. But only when you're only getting that damage bonus if you are triggering burning or hitting opponents with Dendro damage that are already burning. So that kind of rules out to only Emilie at that point. But the attack increase you're still getting. You're gonna get the crit rate, obviously. So there's still a lot of instances where you can use this. I think some people like to use it on Shenhe. Oddly enough, if they want to make her burst crit or whatever, just the higher base attack if they don't have other 5-star options. So there's a lot of areas you can use it in. Even Chevreuse can use this if you want like a damage Chevreuse, which I know is a little bit more niche. Yansan can use it for the higher base attack. Yansan likes that because you're giving attack buff based on her attack, and there's a certain threshold you want to meet, which is somewhere around 2500, so it's helping that. So I don't know, Vixen, what are some other characters that come to your mind with Emilie's weapon?
I mean, I think you kind of said them all because, I mean, if you look at any other, I mean, even Dendro or Pyro characters, you're looking at Emilie, Arlecchino, Chevreuse, Yao Yao, Toma, Hu Tao, and Xiangling. I mean, Emilie kind of is the only one that fits that right now. Technically, you could run this with Arlecchino, if you
Like
are
an
able
Arlecchino
to.
burning team.
Yeah, I guess, if you kind of can make that happen. Just keep in mind with Arlecchino constantly attacking, it could mess up some, as long as you have someone that can consistently apply Dendro no matter what, like Nahida or something, or another Emilie if you have a second copy by accident. You could use this with those two together, obviously with the Arlecchino burning. That's kind of it. I mean, once again, you could try these with other units. Yao Yao's HP scaling, Chevreuse, once again, damage, but mainly, once again, an HP scaler. You are still getting the attack percent buff, so no matter what, that still can be helpful. Even Hu Tao can make use of it technically, and same thing with Xiangling, but maybe a Xiangling in a burning team. Once again, if you have an extra copy of this, that's when it starts to go to other units. But because the only other unit you'd use it with would be Emilie, accidentally getting her weapon without having Emilie, it could be a little bit more of a, you might as well, if you're running a burning team, you probably already have Emilie, so you know what I mean? Like if you accidentally have an extra one, that's when you can start using it outside of this,
Yeah.
but it's not really something that you would go after necessarily for maybe other characters.
Right. And I totally agree. It's like if you happen to just get this on accident, maybe you're trying to go after Mavuika's weapon for your Mavuika, but you never really plan to get Emilie, don't care, then honestly on an account like that, Luminos Elegy is probably just a stat stick for some random 4-star that you have built, and it just happens to be a better option because, oh, I'm getting a lot more crit rate from that main stat. Just a stat stick at that point. So, and that's kind of why we were talking about earlier and kind of alluding to these banners being just kind of a little bit oof, because I think it really comes in to show at the weapon banner, because you really don't want Emilie's weapon without Emilie. Obviously, once
Right.
again, there are uses, but if we're being honest, getting this weapon and not having Emilie is just not going to feel the best. If you're getting Emilie, then obviously I think this banner is actually really good if you were planning to get Emilie or you want Emilie, because if you get Emilie, the weapon banner, there's like no way you can lose, because Mavuika's weapon, even if you don't have Mavuika, I've heard some creators say that Mavuika's weapon is just one of the best weapons in the game, period. It's just has some of the highest stats that it gives in comparison to just what other weapons do, which is kind of interesting. So, and there's a lot of Claymore characters that can use it that we've already talked about. So that's just kind of the thing with this banner. It's a weird one, because Emilie is kind of a weird character for value-wise when it comes to
She
different
fits her
people's
own
count. I
banner
feel like
here.
Emilie is a love or hate kind of character. Either players really like Emilie, they want it for their Kanish, they want it for this, that, the burning teams, whatever. But then there's the other side of the player base that doesn't have Kanish. They don't care about burning, and the middle ground is just very shallow. I'm not going to say it's not there, but... Well, we hope that this video could help you decide on whether these characters or the weapons coming up on the next banner are for you. As always, if you have any questions, suggestions, comments, concerns that may help other players, then go ahead and let us know down in the comments. Thank you again for watching the video, and we'll see you in the next one.